Back to order for Yolo Transportation District, December 8th, 2025 at 6:02 p.m. And we have closed session and there's nothing to report out. Correct, no report out
again.
All right, what's that?
Green light on.
Oh, I thought it was on.
There we go.
No reportable action. Thank you so much. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
City of West Sacramento.
Here. Here. Can you hear me?
Can you
Maybe.
hear us?
Yes. Okay. I can hear you guys.
County of Yolo.
Here.
City of Davis.
Here.
City of Woodland.
Here.
And UC Davis. Here. All right. At this point in the meeting, we will accept comments from the public on items that aren't on our regular agenda. We will have 3 minutes, and does anybody wish to speak to any items? All right. Okay. For consent items. Oh, and for consent.
Yes, Vice Chair Lauren and Chair Early Online and directors do want to report back since they held their meetings in November and uploaded them online to their YouTube pages. I was able to get some key points, takeaways from both the Gold Runner Joint Powers Authority board meeting, along with the Capital Corridor Joint Powers board meeting in November. Both corridors are implementing a schedule change, and that change went into effect today, December 8th. The Capital Corridor is now at their pre-pandemic service levels of 30 weekday trains and 22 weekend trains. And the Gold Runner went back to 7 daily round trips, with 2 of them going Bakersfield to Sacramento or Sacramento to Bakersfield, and the other 5 Bakersfield to Oakland and Oakland to Bakersfield. One key takeaway in the Capital Corridor meeting was the marketing program, Only by Train. Very informative presentation by the marketing staff. And at the Gold Runner meeting were a lot of the folks commenting both at the meeting and online about the lack of cafe cars on the Gold Runner. They had changed equipment recently as well. They did approve a 26 meeting calendar, hoping to be there in person at their meetings in 2026. Lastly, you have the consent calendar, and I'll just close with this, Madam Clerk. I move adoption of the consent calendar, but have a conflict on 6C and on 6F. The day after Thanksgiving, as listed on page 103, should be November 27th. And with that, I move the consent calendar. Thank you.
Thank you so very much for your comments. Do we have any comments online? Oh, we do have that. Come on up.
Thank you for allowing me to collect my Al Hirsch. Bunch of small ones. Last 2 Sundays ago, there was an article in the New York Times about a death, or not a death, but a major accident in Greene County with these e-bikes and a young person. You've heard about this. We have these. There are actually some of these bicycles are more like my bike faster. Wonderful, but some of them are actually worse, almost that powerful, and people, there's no regulation. I would suggest that basically instead of each city have to figure it out. I would suggest that this, within an active transportation plan, you should put that on the agenda. Cities need help for that, and you guys can solve it for all the cities, just like you should be solving the bus stop problem, the standard bus stop problem. Ceremony. Again, that'd be an ideal thing for that body to basically take over. And you're going to give active transportation for the county. I think that's a good thing. So the second thing is the Carter board. There is no way for public input on the Carter board. You can't give public comment. You got to show up. You got to go all the way into Sacramento to make a public comment. We're tolling in Yolo County. We figured out how to call on public comment here. I'm sure Big SACOG, which is much more expertise, should be able to figure it out. And I would suggest that the Yolo County Board, which dominates the CARTA, if they really want public participation, if they're sincere about this should be a change. So I hope the people here on the CARTA Board hear that and make the change in administrative procedures. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so very much. We have another.
Stewart. A few months ago, I spoke about conditions, space, and since then, things have improved to a certain degree. In fact, things are slippery, serious day-to-day basis. In the future, I'd like to believe that anything challenges that we face, but fear that some may suffer the same fate as is in downtown San Francisco, fall asleep behind the wheel. Six should be a productive year, and regardless of what happens with contract proposals, before they be able to contribute to making the old website better place.
Thank you so much for your comments, Alex. Are there any comments online? No public comments online. Great, thank you very much. Seeing none, next is the consent calendar, items 6A through 6B. Does anyone wish to remove any items for discussion? Or remove any items? Seeing none, I'm looking for a motion.
So, 1 second.
We have a motion by Barracks and a second. We have some comments.
We just have a comment online that folks are having a hard time hearing you. So just a reminder to use the mics and speak loudly. Also, our IT person is out for today, so it's possible there's some other contributing issues. Please just try. Alright. Is this any better? It is.
I can hear you talking in the mic.
I think it's lovely. I've usually been not accused of having a low or soft voice. Thank you. All right. So we have a motion. We have a first and a second to roll call votes.
City of West Sacramento. City of West Sacramento.
Aye.
County of Yolo.
Aye.
City of Davis.
Aye.
City of Woodland.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you so very much. Our next section is our regular calendar. And the first item on our agenda, item number 7, is the short range transit plan. It's an action item, and it will be presented by Senior Transportation Planner Tony. Last name.
And I appreciate you actually didn't mess it up. Okay. Thank you. Have a long time. As Director Vice Chair mentioned, I am YoloTD Senior Planner. I'll be talking to you tonight about draft route recommendations and financial scenarios for the short range transit plan. We are also joined this evening by Ron Kilcoyne with TMD, who's the main consultant on this project. So for the agenda tonight, next slide. agenda tonight, I will go over input from the board to date, define the different funding scenarios, provide a summary of what could be implemented for each, and then a number of trips per day per route. We'll go into that. We'll remind you of the route maps that you've already seen, but again, we wanted to make sure that they're fresh in your mind and go over next steps before we touch on the actual recommendations. Next slide. So board input to date, you've actually seen this item multiple times this year, more than is actually listed on the slide, but I wanted to focus on these ones for tonight to make sure that, to remind you all of what has happened. There's a lot that's been happening with the Orange Transit. In April, you supported the converting our service from a coverage model to a frequent model of transit service. We've called this our North Star moving forward, and that is the recommendation that we are striving for moving forward for all of this, the frequent service model. In July, you supported draft recommendations that we went out to the community for in the fall, as well as support for consolidating routes that overlap in both Woodland and West Sacramento. In September, you supported moving the Woodland transfer point from the County Fair Mall to the Main Street location between 5th and 6th in front of the courthouse. And then just last month, you supported restoring fixed route service to Winters and also approved the Woodland transfer point location. So before I pass it over to Ron, I just want to define the different scenarios that you'll see here tonight. So there's for our scope, we are supposed to share with you different funding scenarios. Tonight, we are presenting 2 reduction scenarios and 1 aspirational scenario. And all of as well as the base case, which is what was presented to you and the public in the fall. And all of the tables in the following slides, the base case is shown in gray. This is sort of, hopefully will help you to sort of orient yourself, because there's going to be a lot of words and a lot of numbers on these tables. So hopefully that will help break it up for you a little bit. But I do want to emphasize here that what Ron will be presenting on the next few slides is a sort of a blueprint or a menu of options of what service could look like under each financial scenario. And these are based on best practices in transit service planning, as well as that North Star. And by no means are any of these that will be presented in end all be all. And so don't think that you can't change anything. So as we get closer to understanding our financial future, we can start to look at what the priorities are for our board and for each jurisdiction as we work toward implementation. None of those decisions will happen until the spring. So with that, I will pass it over to Ron.
Thank you, Lola. As you can see, we've developed, yeah, I can't, even though I'll put this together, I can't remember it all. We put together the 4 scenarios that Lola mentioned, and the base case is based on essentially existing revenue hours. Actually, there's a slight decrease in revenue hours, but an increase in revenue miles. And that's mainly because there's more fixed route service, and in calculating this, for Beeline, they don't bill by miles, but for fixed route they do. So in essence, it is essentially the same service. And then the other scenarios, the 80, 90, and 110% scenarios, are variations off of that. Now, the key thing is in the base scenarios, we wanted to go to 30-minute headways on all of the local routes. That would include local service in Woodland, local service in Winters, local service in West Sacramento, and 42A and B, all day long on weekdays. Winters was what posed to be a more interesting issue because we actually, in our survey, we actually gave 3 alternatives. One would be to retain the existing microtransit service with 2 vans. Was 1 van, increase it to 2 vans. 2 would be to scale back to 1 van, but to restore the 220 at the level of service it operated pre-pandemic, which would be 4 round trips on weekdays and 3 on Saturdays. And then the third scenario would be to get rid of the microtransit altogether, but to 220 up to having actually twice as much service as it was often pre-pandemic. And the survey actually was kind of non-committal in the sense of when we gave 3 options, but it was very clear, I think, that the middle scenario, option B, which is retain 1 van for microtransit and restore the 220 with the 4 trips, was seemed to get that most support in that area. So that's what was in there. Should point out that, you know, you as Roland already said, went to the you opted for frequency. That's what our first survey took prior to that. 65% of respondents said, I'd rather walk further for frequent service and have more frequent fixed route service than on-demand service. But likewise, the specifics here. So, so anyway, that's the basic scenario there. I think this slide shows the local service, which would be the 37 and 38 in West Sacramento, and the 213 here in Woodland. And I think the key thing here is we're going not only a 30-minute service as opposed to 60-minute service, but we're, in particular in Woodland, we're going to bi-directional service. And we're going to a single loop. Right now, you've got 2 one-way loops. It would take 60 minutes to make a round trip on either of them. And if you want to get from the western part of Woodland to the eastern part of Woodland, you have to transfer, which could end up being a 2-hour round trip. You can probably walk next to the cases. So here we're going to have a single route, so there's no transferring. It's bi-directional, so we'll take the same distance to go in one direction as the other direction, which will cut down, and it'll go to a half-hour service, which I think, you know, which should greatly make the service more attractive. And in West Sacramento, we're also going to 2 bi-directional routes that have 30-minute service all day long. So I think that's improving. And what we're finding is that, for example, there's an increase in the population that would have within walking distance or 1/4 mile 30-minute service increases by 80%. And the 57% increase in the number of jobs that have access to 30-minute service as a result of these recommendations. And, you know, doing this without increasing operating costs. Next slide. And this is inner city here. So this again, our proposal is 42A and D is to go to 30 minutes all day during the day. And we would go to 60 minutes at night and on weekends, which is what you had previously operated. The reason we need to do that is in order to have the 30 minutes all day, we're going to do this without funding. Once the I-80 funding kicks in, then you'd be able to restore the 30-minute service at night and possibly on weekends. But at least on basic thing, we can go that way, which would be would provide service in there. Causeway connection. And 215 right now, we're not proposing any changes, although there's always the potential of getting some additional funding from Cash Creek to increase service there. But we would want to take a look at the schedule because we've had some complaints about specific times of trips might need some adjustment. And then winters, as I mentioned, base would restore, in all cases would restore the 220. The 90% would also have 4 trips, the 80% would have 2 trips. And then 100 to 10% would be able to go trips.
Excellent. You said 80% is 2 round trips, and then you said 90% is 2 round trips.
90% is 4 round trips, and 100% is 4 round trips, and 110% is 8 round trips. And as far as the B-line is concerned, the Knights Landing, we're not recommending any changes there. For Woodland, we are suggesting reducing that in half, mainly because, again, we feel the fixed route would serve a lot of the trips that currently are handled by B-line because we don't have the direct, bi-directional nature of it and the higher frequency. So it's not like, but we do want to make sure that we retain B-line to areas that are served by fixed route. And then winters, we would go back to the way it was last year in terms of the amount of service in the base case, but would have to get rid of it during the B-line if we had to go to 80-90%, at least at this point. And as Lola said, there should always be adjustments to this, but this is, we wanted to give you a look at what it would take, what the trade-offs are if you had to go to 80 or 90%, which means if you want to retain something different, then you have to cut something else in order to stay that. So, we're not getting that. The next slide is the number of trips per day under the scenario. I think you have a paper there you can look at. I'm not going to take the time to go through all these numbers. So, anyway, that does show the number of trips that would exist. I'll just point out the 42A and B currently has 27 trips on weekdays. This will go up to 31 trips. Both and for both of the and so anyway, that's the same thing on weekends. There would be a little bit of a reduction on the 42A and B on number of trips. The other routes, I think, would be about the same as they currently have. And then I think the next slide goes to some maps that show changing the routes that we are proposing. These show a couple changes to the 42. I think we mentioned this one last time we met, but I'll reiterate it. In Davis, we're suggesting pulling off at Yolo Highway 29, going down the frontage road to serve John Jones Road, serve the hospital there. So that created destination. In Sacramento, downtown Sacramento, we're proposing some major changes, and we're trying to accomplish a number of things in there. Number one, we're trying to come up with a route that will not be subject to detours. Currently, that's a major problem on service with detours, so we looked at the streets that are normally closed for events at the Golden One Center, as well as Capra Mall is also occasionally closed for things, so we tried to come up with a route that avoided that. The other thing is that there's been some new state office buildings that have opened up. One at Richards and 7th Street, and one down near P Street. So this new routing would serve these new state office buildings, and people in the office 4 days a week. Doesn't get too pretty to serve that. And there's also a lot of development occurring besides that office building, sort of in the rail yards area. There'll be a new major Kaiser hospital in that. I think eventually the 7th Street routing will probably shift over to 5th Street. Right now you can't do that. That's being designed to accommodate transit, so that would serve those particular things. And then on the next slide, actually move on to that just shows a little bit more detail. The next slide shows us the change of routing within Woodland itself to go serve downtown. So it'll still serve County Fair Mall on Gibson Road, but it will not go into the transit. And West Sacramento, we're proposing two fixed routes that would run on a 30-minute headway. This would serve much of this existing area, but it also provides some new service along 5th Street, where there's some new development that's going on, and provide particular access. The 37 would go into downtown and would continue all the way up north. So it would be extended further up north to the new office buildings during the peak hour. And of course, the 42 would be beefed up to every 30 minutes service all day long. We'd make sure that the schedule is coordinated. And then Woodland, next slide again shows you the bidirectional route. It would connect east and west Woodland with single service, along with the modifications to 42 and slight modifications to 215, because we're no longer going into the County Fair Mall. But everything does still serve County Fair Mall for whatever for that particular. And then finally, winters, we did make a slight modification to the 220 to serve the area that there was that one trip served before, and also we designing it so that the trips from Davis would move through one direction, and troops from Vacaville would move the other direction. So it could be used for intra-winters trips as well as for trips from Winters to Davis or to Vacaville.
Let's move on. Next slide. So I'll go into next steps. There's more details in your staff report about these, so this is not all of the next steps, but I will highlight our next major one is to develop an implementation plan. And I want to particularly, again, point out that we currently don't know which funding scenario we will be moving forward with. And so that will be decided in coordination with operations our operations and finance teams, and as well as conversations with yourself along with the new transit service operator contract when we start to understand a little bit more about that, and that will happen this spring. Once that is in place, we'll start developing the route schedules. But there are other things that we are working on just separately as part of the implementation plan that are separate from it doesn't necessarily matter which funding scenario is moving forward. So we are developing bus stop standards and guidelines. We will develop key performance indicators for our service, updating our fare policy, and other things that engineers. We will also be developing an implementation outreach plan and then eventually rolling out unintended SRTP. And so we're coming up for our recommendations. Again, I just want to reiterate, this is not an end-all, be-all for what absolutely would be implemented in the future, depending on the funding scenario. But this is a blueprint or a menu of options, if you will, based on best practices and that North Star that you wanted us to move forward with back in the spring, where we focus on frequency over coverage. As we get closer to understanding our financial future, we can have some negotiations for service based on conversations with our member agencies and with you as a whole. So what it does, the recommendations, the staff recommendation tonight and the action we will be taking means that you would approve the four funding scenarios, but does not mean that you are absolutely deciding and committing to a specific scenario. Next slide. And with that, these are our two staff recommendations to approve the short-range transit plan maps that Ron went over, as well as for financial engineering. So much. Ron, I can catch your last name.
Sure one. Yeah, that was so many.
I couldn't, yeah, it was Kilpaw.
Sure.
Really appreciate all of your presentations and how much work that you put into this. Do that. The directors have questions now. Yeah.
Thank you. I do have one clarifying question. It's on slide number 11 presentation for Route 220. Yeah, sorry, I don't have numbers on it. I'm sorry for the running scenarios, intercity routes. Our first one, right, 10% service, 4 round trips, 90 is 4, 80 is 2, 110 is 8, and then I was looking at the 2 slides later. Oh, Route 220, intercity routes, the total number of trips. That's inconsistent.
I agree. Yeah. That should be 16. That should be 16.
Good catch, thank you. We'll make sure to.
What is your first?
Number.
Slide 11.
Yeah, slide 11. There's the smart. Got it. Okay. Number of trips per day, weekdays.
Thank you so much for. I'm going to start on page 108 of the packet. 108 has the service area. It has 80%, 90%, 100%, 110%. And that is for Winters Beeline. So at 80%, it would be discontinued. I think that if you have an item that is 100% and you discontinue it, it's 0%. It's not 80%, it's not 90%. I think that is an error to categorize it that way. It's disingenuous at most. So I want to sadly not support that. And then going on to the 220 on the next page, 109. This is where it says Route 220. It has annual revenue hours, and it has at 3 different ones. So my point is, so what we're calling the 220 is a fixed route that was probably designed sometime in the 1990s, and it has not ever been updated. Our community, I'd say maybe there's population like 4,500 in the 90s, and it's about 9,000 now. The whole town has been developed past that one street that you have, that's Grant Avenue. If you look at the map that you put in the packet that in yellow, you can see that there's nothing provided to most of the town. So I would just suggest that Russell Boulevard or 128 comes in, and it does do East Main, and then I think you do the loop to Grant Avenue, and then you continue going west to Valley Oak, and Valley Oak now goes all the way through. So you would take Valley Oak, not to the last street, but to the second to the last street, which is Neiman. It's a pretty busy street. There's a lot of people over there. There are schools. Do take Neiman and go down Neiman, and then where Neiman meets Main again on that other side, go by the fire station, and then you could go back out, and that would at least provide service to a majority of where people live. And then I would want to mention, on the map that I looked at, it has a street off Walnut that comes through on the map. Walnut it has no other egress. That's not in there now, but it's going to be an area that is developed. It has been developed, but it's going to have maybe 300 more houses put in that have been approved. So that will need to be updated and included in the future model, so that I think what we're all after is developing a culture of riders, so that people take our transportation. And so we need we absolutely need an updated map from the 90s in order to include people. And then I think that would affect your annual revenue hours. And then I think I did say the Beeline one. Your 80% is not elimination, and I just want to be really clear on that. I think that would have been something I would have seen going through the first time. That if you're reducing somebody else's service by 10% to get to 90, taking out a whole service line is just not fair to any city. So I'm looking forward to an update on those items. Any comments?
Chair, I have comments, but I'll wait till after public comment.
Okay, thank you so very much. We can take public comment now, and I think Mike Barnbaum had his hand up.
Oh, yes. City and County of Sacramento have some things to say about this. Thank you. All right, so what would I do if I were able to actually cast a formal vote? Madam Vice Chair and Madam Chair online, I would move to adopt the base case. The base case is the best case, at least for right now. There's going to be a lot of telling as far as costs are concerned when we know what the costs of the contract are going to come out to when the award is coming this spring, and it starts in August. So hold that thought. But I echo your comments about Winters. A small city should not be ever left without service. In fact, if the base case is adopted, then the question is, well, where would, if any additional revenue is foreseen, what should be the priorities? Well, the CARTA, or I think as a consultant Ron Kilcoyne mentioned, the I-80 funding. Winners needs to get that funding first. I think to Director Fong Revis's point about the correction on that one page, it should be at least 16 trips in each way every day, and I support that direction and that clarification and correction that was presented. Thank you, Director Revis, for catching that. Very, very good one. Winners needs that service, especially to connect frequently to the 42s at the transit center at UC Davis. So let me say to that point, when we redo the schedules, because Woodland is going from a transit center to a transfer point, we need to start and end the 42s at a transit center. So I would move within the motion that be the UC Davis campus, and the fallback would be the airport if the TSA is okay with it. But if they're not, I totally understand for security reasons, and it should be a place where there's a lot of foot traffic, and that should be the university. And then I accept the routings in West Sacramento that were spoken at previous meetings by Chair Early. They address a lot of things like providing that north-south connection. And as far as any expansion of service goes, I think we should, in between the two cities, wait for the downtown riverfront streetcar to become reality, because we may not need to do any expansion there. And the focus of the expansion using the I-80 money and the CARTA money should be focused first and foremost on regions. So yes, I'm glad we got to tonight. And that's the motion I put on the table. Thank you both for your comments too.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. All right. I think we have Alan Hirsch. Oh, my voice is stuck. Alan, come on up.
Thank you so much for taking time for me. Frequency versus coverage, I think it was the right decision. I was well advised. I'm concerned that this short range transit doesn't seem to have any context in the presentation. Like the maps of West Sacramento with the routes don't show the existing routes that are non YoloTD routes. So it's hard to make it time for I understand there's some of those. And it's great that Brighton Broadwick are getting coverage. Finally, they're certainly the most likely transit dependent. The Capitol Quarter doesn't seem to be coordinated in here at all. So that's important. That's another way of getting the parallels to 42 route, and certainly it's a lot more cost effective. And thank you for lowering the fares on Capitol Quarter from Davis to Sacramento. That's at least one good thing that came out of the I-80 project, that was surfaced the high fares there. But performance material, I assume some performance metrics will come in here, and I don't see any ridership impacts of the 8%, 90%, 10%, 100%, 110. How can someone make a decision when you don't know what the ridership impacts are? That's really pretty hard. And I mean, we basically discussed about adjusting routes here. It's hard to evaluate that because ridership, we're not. This is not agency is not about running buses. It's about getting people on buses and getting them to destinations. And how do we optimize that? Instead of just coverage in buses. Having a bus run through a neighborhood that no one gets on doesn't make any sense. And let me push back a little bit on Woodland. It's great to run new bus routes and having things in there. Why doesn't the agency know about these new developments before it happens? And why isn't there coordination in terms of making the street grids in these subdivisions more transit friendly right from the get-go? Because otherwise you guys are just putting a Band-Aid in. That's the problem here. You don't design things that are transit friendly from the beginning. And I don't see any in this thing, I don't see any because there's all this increase in development in Woodland, North Davis. I don't see the bus routes that seem to reflect that sort of tremendous change. And clearly, Pole Line Road seems to me to deserve some transit because it's getting really crowded, lots of people coming up and down there. I don't see any designs on that. And part of your plan should be putting in that bus rapid transit type features in our street grid. That should be part of the short range transit plan to speed things up. And I don't see any of that discussed in here. And that's pretty important because I mean, the BRT thing is these new toll lanes on the I-80, but we should put those in the street grids. And you guys should be pushing that onto the public works directors. I know your power is not that much, but you should be in the room talking about that. It should be an advocacy sort of thing. The other thing is I-80, the defunding of I-80. Mike Barnhart suggested that we use the I-80 mitigation funds to put in bus service in winters. That's a grand idea. We should put use it. But where's the most social equity? Why do we toll people from Solano County and then give bus service to winters? There's no money for social equity. Again, I push on this thing. You made a grievous mistake in doing the project. Grievous mistakes in doing that thing. So I know this is all very hard. It's very complex, and I know we're down the road here. But thank you for the hard work and thank you for noodling the details.
Thank you so much for your comments. Do we have any other public comments in the room? Come on, Alex?
Alex Benavides, operator. I understand these are just scenarios, but I might caution against trimming service in Woodland for the Beeline, at least during the week, because the whole microtransit system has been nothing but a hit since the beginning. To see half the service reduced seems pretty drastic. Weekends, maybe you could trim a bit, but a lot of times we're kind of overbooked, actually, especially in the morning. Just for the record.
It's hard to hear you. Next time.
Should I repeat? Okay,
No.
I'll skip right up the quote.
All right. It's not just me, I think. All right, seeing no other commenters in the room, I'd like to call on Director Early.
Thank you. So I had a couple of questions, and then you guys have to let me know if you can hear me or not. So I'm just gonna go to the packet because it makes it easier as well. On page, let's see, 111 of the packet, Route 37 on 110 plus service. I just want to make sure I was following because it looks like it might be an error, but maybe it's not. Route 37, the aspirational, it says 0. Can you explain that to me?
Yes. No, what basically in the aspirational, we'd say that we have two versions. Route 37 stays within West Sacramento. Route 37 DT goes into downtown Sacramento. In the aspiration, all trips will go into downtown Sacramento. And the base case, only peak hour trips go into downtown Sacramento.
And so to your point, for the weekends is what you're asking about, right?
Oh, yeah.
No, it's not. It's the number of trips per day, Route 37. Again, that first line, it says 6, 6, 12, 0, 6, 12, 12, 24, and so on.
So
I was
basically,
just thrown.
trips shifted from the 37 to the 37 DT.
Okay, got it. And so really the doubling, if I'm following from that 12, really you go at the base service, which is 12 routes 37 and then 12 37
Well,
downtown, you just double it to all go downtown.
correct. Yes.
Okay, that's helpful to understand. Okay, I'm gonna keep going on this. So just because I want to make sure I'm clear, we've seen you presented at least to West Sac City Council if nothing changes, the base service, and you guys did, I think, a great job of presenting that. But the 90% and the 80% of service, again, only because I see a lot of presentations, you guys didn't present that, correct?
No, these new funding scenarios, so that this is the first time that has been presented.
Okay, perfect. I want to make sure I'm level setting for myself as well. And so therefore the public hasn't been able to see these reductions either, potential reductions for the funding, right?
That's correct.
Okay. I think where I would struggle a little bit in supporting this today is that although we've done a lot of great, and I say we because we're part of YTD, we've done a lot of great outreach, gotten input, but a lot of it has been focused on if nothing were to change. And I say nothing, that really that's not even really true, right? At least for West Sacramento, but we're trying to keep the service hours, the miles, the same. But as we've discussed several times over, there is a good chance that we may need to reduce because of cost, operational, depending on the contract that we were to go with. And so I would hesitate to support this today without at least having a little bit of opportunity for the public in West Sacramento that would be impacted to weigh in on. Again, I understand that it is, we're not saying it is a likely scenario, but there is a good chance based on costs that we may need to drop down to 90 or 80%. And I would definitely want to get some level of feedback before approving that today.
Thank you very much. Other,
I just,
yeah,
so, and then, so you mentioned at the beginning that these weren't, they're kind of, they're not set in stone. So in terms of if what Director Early, what we talk about, we've seen kind of like worried about this coming to a 90% or 80%. If and when that happens, are these the only options we have to reduce service, right? I mean, it's gonna come back to us as a board and we're gonna say, okay, no, we don't want to do X, Y, Z with this. Approving this tonight doesn't set that in stone, that's what we're gonna see if the services are cut.
Correct. We would be open to negotiations if one community wants to, like Ron mentioned earlier, prioritize one thing as opposed to a different thing, then we can have those conversations.
Got it. Thank you.
Well, I think what we're
So,
looking at.
so why do we need to approve it today then, if it's up for negotiation later?
Yeah, I agree. I actually want to say that if this isn't ready, I think the goal of what the SRTD scenarios is to have a roadmap for how we would have service cuts, recognizing that things can change. But if there are concerns with these scenarios, I don't think we should approve them tonight. I think that we should take the time to make sure that they're right, because we want this to be meaningful. We want this roadmap to be meaningful so that we're not kind of making up service changes on the fly, if you will. So, if we're not there tonight, and I definitely hear some questions and concerns both about what's in the content as well as the kind of whether or not we've gotten enough feedback on the content, I think it's okay for us to slow it down and to kind of keep working on it.
Can I follow up on that? So, and I totally agree and I'm fine with it not, but I think it's hard. We're not gonna know what those circumstances are, right? We just lived through a global pandemic with all these different things going on. We don't know. I mean, like approving that in a way that's like, well, this is really what we think we want to see happen when that happens. We don't know what the world's going to be like in 3 years from now, right? Sure. We just don't understand. We don't know what this contract's going to be. So us approving this next month with more information or more community, I'm not saying we don't do this, but the rub for me is like, we're not going to have that information a month from now or 2 months from now that are going to give us any more clarity on what we want to see cut, right? So I don't like, if ridership grows somewhere, West Sacramento has a big development or community has a big development, now all of a sudden we need to move shift service over there, but it's not in the one that we adopted a year before, right? I just don't know how much more we're gonna get in order to have that be meaningful. Because I 100% agree, it shouldn't just be a box that we check and have it not be meaningful. But in the reality of the situation, we're not gonna have that information to make it quote unquote meaningful anytime soon, right?
So, Director Chapman, I think the only thing I would say to that, I appreciate that we don't know the future per se. I think we have a pretty good idea, though, that costs are going to be a huge issue. We talk about it not only here at YTD, but we talk about it on our transportation committee and in SACOG. And at least for me, knowing that costs are going to be an issue, my community, West Sacramento, has not seen the 80% or 90%. So appreciate the fact that we're not going to know what happens in a year or 2 years, but there's a good chance that cost is going to be an issue. And so it would be helpful, particularly for those who are going to be significantly impacted if we have to reduce, that they at least had a chance to respond to what the potential reduction might be. And what I'm saying is, we've only seen if we do the base route when we know there's a really good chance that it's probably going to be more like 80 or 90. And so I would at least want my fellow council members as well as community members to be able to see these other two scenarios before I vote on it.
Yeah, and I totally agree. I just want to make sure when we're doing the outreach, whether this is just going to councils and that's what we're talking about, or if it's going back into some kind of a community engagement piece, that there's guardrails set, right? That even if that's approved, that can come back to this board and we can make a different decision, right? I mean, that's the reality of what we're talking about. So I just want to make sure that I totally agree with you, Director Early. I think that I'm totally fine with this being moved. I just want to make sure that we're not setting ourselves up down the road of, hey, this is what you agreed to a year ago, and now it comes back and there's a drastically different situation in a community where their needs are different than where they are now, and that we don't hamstring ourselves or set ourselves up to be, criticized that we already made that decision, now we're changing. So I just want to be clear on what we're doing.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's, yes, there's, when we do need to reduce service, there's a whole process that we need to go through, in part because of Title VI requirements. The bar is quite high for public outreach and engagement prior to doing any kind of service cut. So absolutely, before we would cut service, we would have to come back to this board in any event. In terms of doing additional rounds of community and public outreach, I will say, I think that's probably outside the scope of what we've contracted for. So we would probably have to do a budget amendment and scope amendment to do an additional round of public outreach. But if that's the board's direction, we can do that. It's just going to take a little time and cost a little money. But by a little, I don't even know. I'm not going to put Ron on the spot and ask him how much it's going to cost, because that's not fair. But so I think additional rounds of public outreach are absolutely a possibility. And I hear the point that, like, this is the first time you all are seeing this and there hasn't been a lot of outreach on it. We could also do something like bring it back to the TAC and Citizens Advisory Committee and do some kind of like lower cost social media, like bulkheads in our buses and surveys on social media, as opposed to the more time consuming, in-depth, face-to-face public outreach events, for example. So, I mean, I think there's a range of options here, but if that's the direction the board wants to go, we're happy to move this forward, slow this down and do an additional round of outreach if that's the board's direction.
Directors? Director Burns?
Well-
And Director
Sure.
Early, go ahead.
Yeah, I really do want to make sure I'm being clear and appreciate the feedback and the dialogue. I don't necessarily know if I don't think that another major round of community outreach for cost reasons as well as time reasons, because I know we do need to have a short range transit plan in order for our potential new contract with our transit agency to get past it so they could actually respond to that. But what I'm saying is, and Director Bernstein, you said this as well, this is the first time we're seeing this evening. And so there literally hasn't even been an opportunity for anyone in the public to see it at all except for this. And I just don't think that would be fair or appropriate for us to potentially be discussing reductions that no one even had a chance to respond to, even without, right, community outreach or anything else like that. I know at least in West Sacramento, we have the opportunity to tag in our West Sac staff to potentially also at least get some level of eyeballs on this. So people at least have an opportunity to weigh in on this and what it would do to impact them in their current life right now, this year, next year, not even thinking about changes in development or anything else like that. This would impact people right now. And I just want to make sure that we give them an opportunity to respond to that.
Yeah, or would bringing this back to city councils for presentation satisfy that?
I definitely think bringing it back to city council would be helpful, but whether the YTD staff presents to city council or not, at least in West Sacramento, I can say that I'm going to take it to my staff and ask them to meet with each council member regarding how it will impact them. And so I'm not even trying to necessarily put anything on YTD staff. As I said, this is the first time that it's being made public. So I just want to make sure there is an opportunity for others besides us to see it, because as much as I appreciate our YTD meetings, West Sacramentans are not sitting, right, waiting to watch these meetings. And so I just want to make sure that we at least flag this for them before I were to vote yes on it.
Thank you so very much. I think there's a tone of postponement here, but I'm not sure that how we will proceed. So Director Ferris.
Yeah, thank you so much. A couple of quick things of, yeah, I mean, I don't think that it seems like we have to be officially approving it tonight, but just in terms of the time sensitive nature of it, but a few key just questions and points. So one, I appreciated the points raised by Director Early about the just cost issues. I mean, like, I think that's gonna be, likely to be an issue in the next couple of years. And I think based on where everything has been trending and where it continues to trend. So yes, it's a separate process of going to a new contract potentially for an operator, but my guess is that that's, the cost will go up. That just seems to be where we're at these days. And there are some good reasons for that, including like salaries, for example, and benefits, but then there are other things that are kind of out of our control a bit. So I think so it feels like looking at, realistically looking at kind of the 80%, 90% service levels are something that might be a reality, unfortunately, at some point. So definitely just wanted to give a little bit of just some support to those statements from my colleague earlier. A few other quick questions. One in particular, actually, if we are at the 80 to 90% service, either of those levels, I mean, what is the decision behind eliminating the express bus services? I'll just add one more point, which is they're generally successful. And so why would we be, making either adding new service that basically doesn't exist now or we hope to have good ridership in the future versus current service that exists that is well written?
Well, first of all, just to clarify, when you're looking at 80, 90%, it's a matter of trade-offs.
Sure.
And key thing here is I think this is more illustrative. We could either come back with 100 different alternatives of 80, 90%, and this is the way it is, and that would have been too confusing. So the key thing is if you put something else in, then you're gonna have to take something else out. But a big part of is that while from a productivity standpoint, they are because they're peak only, it's a very high cost item. I also realize that there would be, you're taking something away, there'd be opposition. But in terms of being able to get productivity, getting more, generating ridership, it is felt that the, beefing up the 30-minute service would generate more ridership and be more productive over the course of time.
So okay, thank you. I appreciate that. That's helpful. A question I have then, we'll use the Route 213, which I don't know is actually an existing route. And
No, it's a new route.
It's a new route.
It's a new
It's
route.
the new 211 and 2.
It's a new loop around Woodland. Yeah, okay. I appreciate that. So again, we have a proposed new loop around Woodland route, which great, that's good. That would potentially have 60 number of trips per day. And again, we would also still have the V-Line service in the entirety of Woodland that has actually at 100% strength, we'll say. Well, I guess no, it would be half of current service, unless I'm reading that.
Yeah, that's correct. It would be half of current service. Yes.
Okay. So I get that would be less of a service but a lot of fixed route round trips per day. But again, I guess the question is, it is the current service, the replacement of the two current existing services. Those are not particularly well-written lines currently. And so I guess I understand the trade-offs issue, but it seems like if you've got well-written service that exists today versus hypothetical future service that is a consolidation of two lines into one that has a lot of proposed service, but we just don't know if people will ride those buses. So it feels challenging to make a decision that I'm going to eliminate, hypothetically, if we were to go down in our percentage of service offered, let's say go to the 80% service, that I would vote to eliminate buses that are oftentimes more than half full, if not full, on a regular basis. to a hypothetical brand new line that we don't know will have any riders? I mean, how do I make that decision?
So, I mean, the 213 is not a brand new line, right? It is consolidating the 211 and 212. It
Okay.
does have ridership. It's, as Ron indicated, express routes, they are very expensive to run. They do have ridership, no question. But if you actually look at the productivity of our services, believe it or not, the 211 and 212, the two routes that we're proposing and consolidated increase, are still more productive than Beeline and Woodland. As popular as Beeline is, because it's so expensive to operate, you still have higher productivity.
Okay.
And I don't want to speak out of turn. I haven't memorized existing conditions report about whether or not the 211 and 212 have higher productivity than our express routes. And I don't know if these guys do, but I just want to clarify that, like, I think these are difficult trade-offs.
Yeah.
But I don't think that we're going to see, I don't think it would be accurate to say that the Route 213 has no ridership, because it largely overlaps with the routing of the 211 and 212, but turns it into one route.
So a couple things. Thanks. I really appreciate the clarification. A couple quick things. First of all, I'm only using that route as an example. There are many other routes I could pick that are either proposed, currently hypothetical, that are not in existence, that of the ones you suggested, that I can juxtapose those to the express bus service. So that was not a singling out of Woodland and Woodland route. So let me be very clear about just trying to use that as an example. Okay, thanks. That's helpful.
If I may, can I make one other point on the express routes? I'm sorry to interrupt.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Appreciate it. With our last SRTP or COA, which was done during COVID, there was a decision made to prioritize transit dependent people who were riding regularly over kind of what we call choice riders. And so we suspended all of the fixed route, or of the express service during that period of time, because we do know that, like, the express routes tend to serve choice riders, right? These are kind of like 9 to 5 commuters that often have choices, whereas the folks that are riding our local routes generally tend to be more transit dependent. So there is, and folks who are riding the express routes can ride the 42. So it's not like they have no option for getting to downtown Sacramento, right? All the express routes go to downtown Sacramento. Now, at their home locations in Davis and Woodland, they may not have, the 42 may not go as close to their house as like the express routes do. But there is another option for those folks to get to and from downtown Sacramento, whereas for, like, example, the local routes in Woodland and West Sacramento, there's not a lot of other options. So that's my pitch, but I'm not gonna, I appreciate you letting me.
I appreciate that. I mean, I'll just say, a couple quick, one kind of additional item there. It's just, one of the items and sort of rationale for the YoloTD project was to provide a transit lane for increased transit services.
Yeah.
So it's not reduced transit services. So I'll just, but I do appreciate that. A couple quick things. So a couple other quick things. So one, definitely supportive of the direction of frequency over coverage. I mean, absolutely. I think that makes a lot of sense. I'm really glad to see that sort of change, as an agency. Whether or not we're going to be able to do frequency over coverage, it remains to be seen, but I'm very much supportive of the direction. I've raised the issue of cost likely being an issue, so I still think that's going to be a challenge. On some of the kind of proposed maps, really totally very, very much appreciate on the Route 42, the sort of trying to loop in the Sutter Davis Hospital area and that whole, there's a lot of like other synergies around there, a lot of folks. I think that could be really positive, so just really happy to see that proposal. Also, in terms of the 42, the sort of getting off north of downtown Sacramento and kind of through the rail yards area, I think we heard that loud and clear from a lot of residents of Yolo County. That was something that they were interested in. But because of all the new state office buildings and such, I think it's a really good potential move. And also because of the detours issue that you raised too. Yeah, I totally understand why making some of those adjustments in downtown makes a lot of sense. One quick little note, just as heard this at the last CCJPA board meeting, but ridership is up 30% in the city pair, the Davis Sacramento city pair, since the reduction in fares, down to $6 one way per ride. It's only been a couple months of that, but we're talking year over year, 30% increase growth. So there are other, we did reduction in city pairs across fares across a number of other city pairs, so it wasn't just a Davis Sacramento thing across the Capital Corridor, and there are numerous other cities that have seen pretty decent increases because of these reductions, like, for example, like Sassoon, Richmond was another one that had decent increases, but the Davis Sacramento city pair was the highest, like hands down across the entire Capital Corridor line, which is great because we want people taking more transit. The other last few items, in the proposed Route 37 in West Sacramento, totally also appreciate just sort of the responsiveness to the discussions we've been having around that connection of Southport to downtown Sacramento, right? I mean, just, and catching all major, parts of West Sacramento along the way. That was something also I feel like we heard a lot of from, we've heard a lot of over time, but we've also heard from a lot of riders, potential riders and residents of Yolo County that they were interested in that, so I really appreciate that. And then so two last things, on the Route 220 proposed routing, I do agree. I mean, I appreciate just Director Lauren's comments about the sort of taking a look at the routing. I mean, I do think that like there is this, I already drew on the map, but basically, yes, railroad to Neiman to Main Street essentially, and just shaving off this little like West End loop. I mean, I think this is where all the new houses are and developments and schools and everything are all in that portion. So it makes a lot more sense, I think, to take a look at something like that. And then the last quick item is just around, that was mentioned, I think, in public comment as well, but the Road 102 kind of point-to-point service, that kind of discussion that we've had before. There's not currently Yolo bus service anywhere along that corridor, and I think that still needs to be looked at. I mean, it's there are two sort of that, eastern side of Davis, eastern side of Woodland, it's already a major vehicular, single-use car corridor, and people going to and from for a bunch of reasons, especially shopping and school and other things. So just really want to advocate for, and that didn't come up at all, and so just putting that out there. Those are all my comments. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. One point of clarification, I think it wasn't presented, but I believe, and I'm asking Yolo to confirm, that the pole line, restoration of the pole line service, I thought was in the 110% scenario, but it didn't come up tonight, and
Okay.
yeah, but it should be, it should have been.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So we'll go forward on the item. Are we taking a motion?
I'm sorry, Madam Chair. What was that?
Go ahead.
Expansion for one table.
So Brian's confirming that they are, the pole line service is in one of the tables in the staff report.
Okay, great. I apologize. I must have just missed it, so my apologies.
Vice Chair Lauren, are you able to hear me? Perfect. I see nodding. So I just, again, because I'm watching via Zoom, so I might not be following completely. Would we be motioning to postpone? Is there general agreement on that? Do we need to motion to postpone?
So if I may, I think it'd be helpful probably to do a motion to continue the item to a future meeting for approval based on the direction this evening and seeking additional feedback, which I think generally what I heard would be a motion, unless the board wants to provide a specific meeting date, but alternatively you could just say to bring it, for staff to bring it back.
Perfect. Then I can make that motion. I can't see everyone's faces, so I don't know if you guys are in general agreement or not, but I'll go ahead and make the motion to continue this item to a future date to allow for some more feedback and to bring it to our different colleagues in our jurisdictions.
Chair's made a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Oh, we have a second by Moreno. I wanted to call him by his first name. Sorry about that. All right,
Can I just say one thing,
yeah,
sorry,
go
and I think we brought up the TAC and the CAC, but that, make sure that
Yep.
that's just going to that, both of those groups as well. Oh, thank you.
I accept that friendly amendment.
City of West Sacramento,
Aye.
City of Windsor, County of Yolo,
Aye.
City of Davis,
Aye.
and City of Woodland,
Aye.
and motion to postpone and continue passes. Thank you very much, staff, for your hard work, and thank you, directors, for your hard work and really good questions on the item. Our next item is agenda number 8. It is a briefing on the MOU governing allocation of federal transit funds in the Sacramento urbanized area. This is an information item only. We will begin with the presentation from Executive Director Autumn Bernstein and
yes, and he's not on your agenda, surprise visitor now. I am happy to be joined by our special legal counsel, Kirk Trost, who has been helping support staff on this item. I will be giving the presentation, but ask Kirk to be here as well to answer any questions and to share any perspectives that, anything that I miss when we talk about this. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, pleasure.
All right, so we are going to, this agenda item is to talk about the MOU for how transit funding in the Sacramento urbanized area is allocated. I apologize in advance for the density and complexity of the slides. This is a lot. This is not an action item, but you are going to be asked to approve an updated MOU sometime in the spring, and negotiations around this have reached a point where the parties collectively agreed to start briefing our boards on it so that you can start to have some familiarity before this comes to you for formal action. And I will also just point out that this MOU will also come to the SACOG Board of Directors for approval as well, since they are also a party to this agreement. All right, so moving right in. The first section, I apologize for one moment. I am in the wrong place. Okay. I also want to thank SACOG staff and to say that the prettier slides in this deck all came from SACOG staff, and appreciate them for that. So this first section is really just giving you an overview of how FTA funding works in the region and in the Sacramento UZA. So FTA funds about 1/3 of the transit operating and capital expenses region-wide. And it's about 1/3 for YoloTD as well. So we're pretty consistent with the regional average. And I would say don't look too closely at the local and state boxes. It looks like we have no local funding and other agencies do. It's just a matter of the way that different agencies report TDA funds. Some report LTF as local funding and some as state funding. But roughly 1/3 of ours and everyone else's transit operating expenses are funded by FTA. Next slide. So there are 4 what's called urbanized areas as they're defined by the federal government in the SACOG region. The largest is the Sacramento region, which includes most of Sacramento County and also portions of Yolo, El Dorado, and Placer counties. And then there are 3 smaller UZAs, which are Woodland and Davis and Yuba City. And this slide shows you approximately how much funding flows to each of those urban areas every year from the federal government for transit. So here's where the slides get ugly, and I apologize. So this slide is really showing you what the different FTA programs are and how they work. The pink box on the left shows you how much funding FTA gets federally. It's about 11.5 billion this fiscal year. And then the green box shows you there's a formula that they use every year. That's a very complicated formula that then relies on data that we report annually, all the transit operators in the country, about how many miles of service we're running, how much ridership we have, what our expenses are. And then they take the money that they get from Congress and they divide it up according to this formula, and then they put it out to our 4 UZAs. So the Sacramento UZA at the top, which has Sacramento RT as its designated recipient, and we'll get more into that later. And then the 3 small UZAs. Every small UZA in California has Caltrans as the designated recipient. So all 3 of the small ones here do as well. And then for the Sacramento UZA in particular, it's broken into 4 different buckets. That 3rd bucket, high intensity state of good repair, is for light rail only, or rail systems only. So we are not eligible for any of that funding. So it's about $60 million total from the Sacramento UZA, of which about 40 million we share. We have no part of that 20 million for high intensity state of good repair. Next slide. All right. So now, this is a little bit about how the FTA formula works. And again, apologies, but this is important. So those two pink boxes, there's regional earnings and agency earnings. So basically about 2/3 of the funding in the region is calculated based on agency earnings. This is things like how many miles of service are we doing? What are our costs? How many riders? So that's what that agency earnings bucket is. You can see it's about $38.1 million. And then the other third is what we call regional earnings, which is based on factors like population, density, low-income population, stuff that has really nothing to do with transit and is more demographic. And as the region grows, that amount of money grows, if that makes sense. So anyway, it's about a 2/3, 1/3 split. And that's important because some of the proposals for this MOU are based on looking at breaking up how regional and agency earnings are divided. Next slide. Okay, and so the process by which these funds are allocated depends. If you're a small UZA or a large UZA, it's different. So we get money from the Davis UZA, Woodland UZA. Again, that'll go through Caltrans. They're our designated recipient. That's very different. But for the Sacramento UZA, there is a local agreement. And that local agreement basically governs how those funds get divided between us and the other transit operators. Next slide. So, these three boxes show you who are the recipients of FTA funding. In Sacramento, you can see we share it with a number of other agencies, the biggest of which is SAC-RT, but also Roseville, El Dorado, Placer, and there's a few very small ones that are not included here, Paratransit Inc., South County Link, et cetera. And then in Davis, it's us and Unitrans, and then in Woodland, it's just us. Next slide. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little about the existing MOU and the history of how we got here. So why do we have an MOU? Well, for transit operators, I guess before we had an MOU, every year it was kind of a food fight, if you will, or a discussion and a negotiation every single year with no parameters over how these funds would be spent. So there was a decision made to have an MOU to provide stability and predictability in annual funding cycles, because obviously we're running transit service. We don't want to have to radically change it every year because funding is changing. So there was an agreement made in 2015 to have this MOU to give us that stability and predictability, but it also allows us to tell FTA, we're doing this in a way that is compliant with all of the policies that the feds have. If we didn't have an MOU, there is an FTA apportionment formula that is very complex, that kind of would form the basis for it. But if any deviation from that would have to be justified. It also creates some benefits for SACOG, since many of you serve on the SACOG board. It clarifies the roles and responsibilities for SACOG and the transit operators, because SACOG does also have an important role to play as the transportation planning agency for the region. And there's federal requirements that they have to comply with. And also an MOU allows them to try to, as much as possible, coordinate with the transit operators around implementation of SACOG's goals. Next slide. This slide says a bit about SACOG's federal planning role. I'm happy to answer questions on it, but I won't spend a lot of time on it. But just know that SACOG does have important responsibilities for the federal planning process. Next slide. And I want to say a bit about the designated recipient. So FTA requires all the larger UZAs to have at least one designated recipient. In fact, the small ones have it too, but it's just Caltrans, so it's easy. It can be an MPO or it can be a transit operator. It must be designated by the governor with concurrence. So concurrence from you, concurrence from us as a small transit agency. This is essentially a consensus-driven process to determine these who our designated recipient is. Next slide. So the current, and the responsibilities of the designated recipient, it's an important role. They administer all the FTA funding programs. They prepare the split letter saying how much money each agency gets. And they do an annual program of projects to solicit input on how the funds will be used. And they verify that we're spending the money on eligible projects. So the current MOU was negotiated in July of 2013. And there was essentially separate conversations about the MOU itself and then also about how the money would be allocated. And they took the FTA formula as the foundation for discussion, but wanted to develop a local formula that best reflected what the region's needs were at the time. So what's in that current MOU? Well, it identifies a formula for how our funds are allocated. I'll say a bit more about that in a minute. It reserves 12% of the funding for a competitive grant program that's managed by SACOG. And it identifies SACRT as the designated recipient, but it delegates some of those responsibilities to SACOG. So it kind of has a blended role, if you will, between SACOG and SACRT. Next slide. So this is how that formula works within our MOU. Essentially, there's 4 factors and they're all weighted equal, not weighted equally, excuse me. Passenger trips, revenue miles, and revenue hours are all weighted equally at just under 30%, and then population is about 13%. And you can see on the right-hand side, that's our share of the regions, of those metrics overall for the region. And so we get about 3.5% of that funding, at least we did in fiscal year 2024, which is about $1.2 million. But of course, those shares can change, right? So as we reduce service, increase service, our shares will change. And so interestingly, our share for 2025 has actually gone down, not because we've reduced service, but because other agencies have increased service, right? Makes sense? So our share is constantly changing based on what we're doing and what other agencies are doing. So that 13% earned share for the comes from population. It essentially, this again, that is the outline of the Sacramento UZA. It uses the most recent 10-year census. And next slide. And it essentially assumes that West Sacramento is all attributed to us. Sac County goes to SACRT, Roseville goes to Roseville, et cetera. So the population is carved up basically by those geographic boundaries. Next slide. And then the other three factors are all based on what the data that we report every year to NTD for our vehicle revenue miles, trips, and revenue hours. All right, next slide. So why are we updating this MOU? Why do we need to change this MOU? Well, because FTA said so. FTA and FHWA told SACOG that they need in 2023 that they needed to update the MOU to make sure that it is current and clearly defines the planning process, rules, and responsibilities, and that all area transit providers are in the MOU. You're like, well, that's weird. Why aren't all the area transit operators in the MOU? Well, it turns out that that's changed. There's been some changes. Some transit agencies have gone away. Like Elk Grove and Folsom used to have their own transit. They've been consolidated into RT. Placer County has done some reorganization as well. Not a lot has changed here in Yolo County, but in other parts of the region, it has changed. Next slide. So starting in April of this year, SACOG began convening meetings of an MOU working group with all the parties. It includes all of us who are parties to the 2015 agreement, plus several other agencies. And an important point of clarification is that 2015 MOU cannot be changed unless all parties agree. Again, this is very much a kind of a consensus type process, so that one agency cannot unilaterally cancel it. So FTA is requiring an updated list of signatories, but again, no changes in Yolo County. And also asking for updated language on roles and responsibilities of SACOG and RT to make sure it's consistent. Again, there's this kind of fuzziness around what RT is doing and what SACOG is doing, and FTA wants that to be more clear, and that whoever is the designated recipient should only be doing designated recipient responsibilities. Those should not be delegated as they are right now. So those are the changes that are required. But what has happened is that as the MOU has been reopened, other issues have come up and been put on the table by the various parties. And so I want to run through what some of those are right now. They are the three, and I'll dive into detail on each of this, but the three are changing our allocation formula, eliminating the competitive grant program, and potentially appointing SACOG as a co-designated recipient. So to take those one by one, let's start with the allocation formula, or earned share formula, as we call it. There are three options that have been proposed that we are being asked to provide, to say what is our preference on these three. It's not clear to me that these will be the final three options, but these are what we have in front of us right now, and we're being asked to weigh in on which of the three we prefer. And so we'll go through them, A, B, and C. So option A is the FTA formula for agency earnings only. So if you remember that two-part between agency earnings and regional earnings, this would say all of the money is only accounting for agency earnings, basically getting rid of population and population factors entirely. And so what that means is like, however many miles of service you're operating, that is essentially the primary determination of how much funding you get. So under that scenario, we'd get about 2.9%, about 1.2, a little less than $1.2 million. That's option A. Option B is our existing MOU formula, so no changes from that. But as you can see, our share of funding has gone down to about 2.7% from 3.5 last year, again, based on some of the changes that have happened to the region overall. So again, hovering around 1.2 million. And then option 3 is a hybrid of these two. So it would say that the agency earnings share would be allocated using option A, and that the regional earnings would be using the option B formula. And so under that, we get about 2.8% or about $1.13 million. So what you can probably see here is there's not massive changes for us between any of these three options based on our current funding level. We get treated roughly the same, at least based on our current share of the regional service. I shared the next slide, just a kind of a summary overall that gives you a sense of how this shakes out at the regional level and how it compares. And what you see is, at least based on our current earnings, SACRT has a higher percentage overall, and which makes sense. They're a larger agency and they run a lot more miles of service. And so they end up kind of being the ones that do the best. The other small transit operators, I should say under option A, SACRT does the best. And other small transit operators take a bigger hit than we do, particularly Placer and Roseville. Next slide. So I was kind of starting to go there, getting into our analysis of options. The existing MOU formula option B kind of provides continuity and stability for us. It also provides stability in a range of possible scenarios because it has multiple factors. Option A, which is just based on agency earnings and particularly miles of service, that could create more volatility for us because if we have to cut service, we're going to reduce our miles of service, then we're going to take a bigger hit in terms of our federal funding. So even though it's relatively neutral now, if we were to foresee service, say we had to do like the 80 or 90% scenario in the SRTP, we're going to take a hit no matter what, but we would take a bigger hit under option A because we'd be cutting miles of service. So it would amplify volatility. Now, conversely, if we were to get a bunch more money, say we passed a sales tax measure, right? Or the toll revenues on I-80 are wildly beyond expectations and we could afford to increase service, then we would get a bigger share. So it's a bit of a winner take all feedback loop, if you will, that kind of rewards agencies that have other large, growing, stable sources of funding. So there's risk. It's a bit of a high risk, high reward approach, if you will. Option C, the hybrid is very similar to option A, but provides a bit more buffer. For context, I think this was a kind of, SACRT had proposed option A. I think most of the small transit operators like option B, and SACOG staff had proposed option C as like a compromise, if you will. We believe that option B is the best of these options for us. We think maintaining the existing 2015 split probably is in the best interest, at least of the options that's on the table right now. Okay, how are we doing?
We're doing great.
Okay.
A lot of energy in the room.
All right. Okay, we're getting there. That was a lot. The next few are a bit less math heavy, and so hopefully a bit more straightforward, at least for the way my brain works. Okay. The next area is eliminating the competitive grant funding program. So as I mentioned, about $4 million annually is set aside for a competitive grant program. The proposal is to eliminate this program completely and have all of those funds flow via the formulas that we talked about. So no more competitive grant program. All those funds just go via formula. And because again, we know which agencies do the best in the formula, this is essentially most of those funds would then go to those agencies. So it would really only, if we went to a formula approach for these dollars, we're not talking about very much for YoloTD. It's about $100,000 a year. Historically, we've done quite well when we apply for these grants. We've gotten some pretty big grants in the past. I think we punch above our weight. In part because there are other discretionary grant funding programs in SACOG, there absolutely are. But in those, we're competing with all modes, we're competing with the cities, we're competing with the counties. This is the only one that is dedicated and set aside for transit operators. There's a lot less competition for us in this grant program, which has allowed us in part to be successful. So, we would hope that we could make up those lost funds through other funding sources, other competitive funding rounds, but the competition is deeper. So we like the competitive grant program. We think it's in the best interest of us in the region. I will say it's also, and Kurt can speak to this better than I can, but it really eliminates an important opportunity for SACOG to encourage the transit operators to think regionally and to align what they're doing with the blueprint. And I think as someone who is a regionalist, I think that that's an important role for SACOG to be able to play and to have some funding that it can use to encourage transit agencies to think regionally. Because we have a lot of people in this region that travel regionally, right? They don't just keep all their trips in one county. All right, next slide. This is about the designated recipient issue that I brought up earlier. So as I mentioned, the 2015 MOU does delegate some responsibilities from SAC-RT to SACOG, but FTA has objected to that. FTA does allow for what's called a dual designated recipient, where you have multiple designated recipients in a large UZA. So under this model, SACOG would essentially be the designated recipients for the small agencies like us, and SAC-RT would continue to be its own designated recipient. Next slide. So I'll just highlight that when SAC-RT became the designated recipient, it was the only agency in the UZA. So it makes sense that it was at that time. But the region has grown and its regional representation is really important to us. The SAC-RT board only has representation from Sacramento County. SACOG is the only regional agency that has representation from all 6 counties. And so we think we would not want to have those important responsibilities given to an agency on which we have no representation. So SACOG is open to a co-designated recipient model. And they've expressed that I think there's not openness to them becoming the only designated recipient, but there is an openness to them sharing that responsibility with SAC-RT. Next slide. And I would just point out this table is mentioned to indicate that it would not be unusual for the MPO to be the designated recipient or a co-designated recipient. In fact, if you look at the large UZAs in California, the overwhelming majority of them, the MPO is the designated recipient. It's only in a handful of cases that it is a transit operator. And so, I will say we think that rather than having SACOG no longer have any responsibilities as a co-DR, we would like to see them be a co-designated recipient. So, next steps, continue negotiations at the staff level. You can go to the next slide, Janine. And then I think the timeline, the hope is that there would be a proposed MOU for board review and approval in spring of 2026. Thank you for your attention. I know that was a lot and happy to answer questions. And Kirk, did you want to add anything?
So I guess I would like to just add a couple things. I think that all the parties to these negotiations, they come in good faith, they come wanting to be regional partners, but I think about how I act as a lawyer. There are some times where you just can't have a conflict of interest, right? You can't represent both sides on a party. The role that the designated recipient plays is really important in determining who gets funds, which transit agencies get funds. And the bottom line is that regional transit has their own self-interest in sitting in that role that is different from the other parties at the table. We're not saying they're bad people. In some sense, they're acting how they should and how we expect them to act, but there's an inherent conflict of interest in that role. And the last thing I'll say about the discretionary funds, the notion that we can invest money as a region in ways that benefit everyone was fundamental to the blueprint that was the original blueprint that was adopted in 2004. And Chair Early, there's a great example about West Sacramento. In 2004, when the region was trying to figure out how are we going to handle all of the housing requirements that are coming to us from the state of California, and West Sacramento said, you know what, we'll help all of you who are having a hard time meeting your housing obligations. We'll take more of that housing. But the grand compromise was, region, you need to give us more money in the early years of the blueprint because we have to build the infrastructure and prepare our community for that housing. It was an investment of money out of discretionary pots to West Sacramento to serve what was a regional need for everyone. And there are fewer and fewer discretionary pots, as many of the interests in the region say, send the money to us on a formula basis. And preserving important ones like this, I think, is a really important thing for this board to secure.
Thank you so much. Directors, do we have questions or comments? Director Burr?
Just one quick question. Apologies. I mean, if I missed this, and I apologize. That just in terms, so yes, continued negotiations at the staff level, proposed board review and approval in spring 2026. But who ultimately, will say, calls the question on this, right? I mean, it's, there's across California, many MPOs serve as the designated recipient, for example. So who makes that final determination? Is it gonna be SACOG or, just curious about that.
Yeah, great question.
Who
So,
and when, I guess. Yeah, that's the other part.
so it's the governor of the state of California with the consensus or whatever that phrasing is, with the agreement of all of the transit operators, and the local elected officials, essentially local officials. So the answer is the MOU is what decides it. So the MOU specifically says, we all agree that, X should be our designated recipient. So that's one of the things that we have to negotiate. If we cannot reach agreement, the SACOG is the one that's responsible for facilitating those negotiations. If we can't reach agreement, then FTA would step in if need be to try to help facilitate agreement. But there is no one person that decides.
Thanks so much, Nancy.
Can I just add to that until you agree, until everyone agrees, it's the 2015 MOU that remains in place and the parties are required to comply with it until you agree otherwise.
Yeah, thank you. Okay.
Thank you. That's a really good point. Other comments and questions?
I wanted to say that was an excellent example of how West Sacramento was able to help.
I'm not sure if you all noticed the great work on West Sacramento and that. Right.
I couldn't help it. It's very late here, y'all.
You were early supporters. Yeah, all right. Public comment?
Okay.
Mr. Barnbaum.
Thank you. Yeah, so let me just piggyback on some of that that you were just mentioning and putting West Sacramento in a good spotlight. West Sacramento and housing and transportation and the growth of the city was just recently featured on To the Point with Alex Bell on ABC 10. And Dr. Early and Vice Mayor Supuzio Hall were part of a sit-down interview as part of the format. It is available on the ABC 10 Plus streaming app, wherever available, and on YouTube as well. And I had watched it on YouTube, and it was a very awesome commercial-free 23-minute presentation that I was able to see. I will say on this item, thank you to the Bernstein Institute for Advanced Transportation Studies for this. Sacramento State, and I hope UC Davis support this. As far as I know, just from us non-voting members, and Caltrans isn't here today, but I know their district headquarters are based in Yuba County, where many of their representatives come from. So I would say, just from both the voting and non-voting members of this board, this is a pretty diverse board, just like SACOG is, which at least 3 counties are on this board: Sacramento County, Yuba County, and Yolo County. And only Yolo County representatives vote, and that's fair. But I would like to see maybe a change where you mention about Caltrans and YoloTD. I would like to see if YoloTD is able to be a better recipient of that funding. But in looking at how that 2015 MOU was mentioned, it looks like it's more like a case of how a jury has to operate. If one juror doesn't agree, but everyone else agrees, that it's a hung jury. So I look at that similarly, that everyone has to agree, and it has to be 100% agreement in order to change, and there can't be one outstanding party that's a no. So hopefully, this is something that can progress. I know this is an information item today, but I guess when it comes to action, I guess we'll take a test on it. When it comes to action, there's a lot of studying we have to do before then. Thank you.
Thank you so very
Yeah.
much. Al? Mr. Hirsch?
Thank you very much. Can you put up slide 3, while you, slide 3 with the bar chart, which is kind of interesting. In terms of the options for the MOU, I think B is the best. I agree with Autumn, but for a different reason. The A seems to reward just running empty buses. Well, we want to basically reward social equity, which the agencies have the biggest need into demographics or whatnot. So I think the A, the B, the current status is the best one, most social equity one. Second, the competitive grant program. Yes, I think it's competitive versus things. We should mention our secret weapon. We have a very innovative transit director here who could probably be more competitive than the other ones. So I think that's where we stay with the competitive grant program. And on this bar chart, which has the bar chart, the third slide that has it's way back, it has the charts with all the agencies of how to state, federal, local. If you will notice on that, the top one is Unitrans, which is weird because the ASU is big. It's how much fare box recovery we get. ASU is really grand, really big, and then we have paratransit is obviously an anomaly, but YOLO transportation, just like on that bar chart, is 16% fare box recovery. The next one is 12. We are one of the highest fare box recoveries. I don't understand why, but it should be noted. We're 25% higher than the next one. So I think that's kind of an interesting question for.
I'm happy to answer that if you're curious. It's actually because our Cache Creek mitigation funding counts as fare revenue.
What is it? Sweet.
The Cache Creek mitigation money counts as fare revenue.
Cheated there, all right.
I know. I can't help it. I can't help it.
No other direction? Chair Early, anything? I don't see your hand up. No, okay. Well, is that enough direction?
Yes, thank you.
All right, thank you very much. We're gonna move on to item number 9, which is appointing the chair and vice chair for 2026. Yeah.
We don't have any slides on this, Madam Chair. So I would refer the board members to what's in the staff report, and the way that we have traditionally done this is it is a rotating chair position. So what we typically do this time of year is we thank our outgoing chair for their service. And we would then appoint the vice chair, who is currently Director Lauren from Winters, and then according to our rotation, the next vice chair would be Director Ferris from Yolo County.
Great. Early motions for current vice chair Lauren to be chair and Director Ferrex to be vice chair.
Second.
Just double check for public comments.
I will. That was so fast. All right, do we have public comment?
Yes, I'd like to make a substitute motion. Yes, good evening, Vice Chair Lauren and Chair Early, members of the board. Michael Barnbaum from the Sacramento jurisdictions and Sacramento State. I would like to make a substitute motion due to some of the unfinished business that this board and staff are working on, are making great progress on, but final approval and actions haven't occurred yet, and they will more undoubtedly next year during the year of the midterm elections. Specifically, the continuing discussion on the short-range transit plan, And probably the most critical item going into next year, the adoption of the RFP for the transit operations contract. We've done a lot of work this year, but on those two items, those are unfinished business. We have successfully approved the Woodland transfer point, and staff and us will be making progress on that throughout next year. But I think that with unfinished business, and I've dealt with this on other boards in the past outside of here, having a sense of continuity and continuing leadership, I think is going to be very essential. So in my substitute motion, I would like to recommend Chair Early continue as chair for 2026 throughout the calendar year until our unfinished business is adopted, and Vice Chair Lauren as continuing as vice chair, and adopt a second vice chair, just in case there are scheduling conflicts. They always come up, and Director Vega be the second vice chair, so we can have a smooth transition to the Woodland transfer point, switching from the current transit center at the County Fair Mall. So that is the substitute motion I would like to put on the table. I have no objection about the main motion, but would put the substitute motion on the table. That's my preference. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments.
Yes.
Do we have any other public comments? Awesome. I have a question for Chair Early. Would you be leading this board during 2026?
No, I'm not leaving this board during 2026. However, I do believe in my colleagues. I will still be on this board and pushing to make sure that the things that we set forth this past year will get done. Obviously, you guys have experienced me, and I have no problem with speaking my mind and being very vocal. And I promise to continue to do that. And so I'm excited. Chair Lauren, Vice Chair Lauren, but to see you in the chair role. And I don't think Director Ferrix has had an opportunity to be chair since he's been on this board. Director Ferrix, you're gonna have to correct me if I'm wrong on that one.
Not as a county supervisor, but yeah, I've had.
Okay, there you go. So I would continue with my motion and hope I can get a second. And after I get a second, I would like to say just one thing regarding just my year of being chair.
We have a second by Director Chapman.
Perfect. Okay. Can I make just one comment? One more additional? I appreciate your patience. I will say I just want to thank my colleagues for this past year. Transportation was not my area, and I appreciate you all being so supportive and patient. The one thing that I was really hoping that we would be able to get done as a board was seeing that transit transit center made possible and moved forward after 6 years, I think, of not being able to push it through. And it was because of Director Vega and all of you working together that we were able, and of course our YTD staff working with Woodland staff, that we were able to really move that item and see it through. And so I'm very, very excited for all of our constituents across our jurisdictions that take public transportation, and very excited for Woodland as well to be able to have that moved from the County Fair Mall, and obviously for our staff too. And so thank you very much for allowing me to be chair and for supporting how you have this past year.
Thank you so very much. Do the directors want to make any comments or accolades now, or wait till after the vote to acknowledge Dante's great service?
I actually was gonna ask her a question just to see if
Okay.
if you believe you'll be here in person next month.
Oh, I will. This it is unusual for me to be out of state. I will definitely be there in person next time.
I was hoping that we might be able to just say that bit of this item until next month while she's here in person. That was all I was gonna suggest, yeah. I mean,
Excellent direction.
we can say positive things now too, but I'm happy, but it's kind of nice when you're in the room. So either way.
We will
Thanks,
celebrate
Lucas.
you when you were back in our room here.
I love it.
So need a roll call vote on the motion. And the motion was made by Director Early and seconded by Director Chapman.
City of West Sacramento,
Aye.
City of Winters,
Aye.
County of Yolo,
Aye.
City of Davis,
Aye.
the City of Woodland,
Aye.
and motion passes.
Yay. All right. Thank you very much. I like a vote by jazz hands. All right, we have administrative reports. Next, do board members have any verbal reports? Seeing none, we will hear from our executive director.
Great. So I love that I have the opportunity to tell you this, but that we have been recommended for a $14 million award for as part of the Affordable Housing Sustainable Grant Program, Affordable Housing Sustainable Communities Grant Program, along with the Yolo County Housing Authority. So we will be getting $14 million for 12 electric buses, plus chargers, plus new bus shelters here in Woodland, along with the funding that the Yolo Housing Authority will be getting for 73 affordable housing units and some bike lanes and sidewalk improvements at the Tupelo site, just right around the corner from here. So the staff report came out last week, and the Strategic Growth Council will be voting on that on Wednesday. We were the third highest ranking project in the state, y'all.
Oh my gosh. That's so cool. I sit on both those boards. That's awesome.
I'm happy we got to tell you first then in that case. And Lola Torney, who was just sitting here earlier, deserves all the credit. She was the one who was working super hard to make that possible. So kudos to Lola. Also wanted to note that our transit operations RFP for our new operations contract was posted before Thanksgiving on the November 21st. Proposals are due February 6th. So we are on track with our timeline for that. We'll be having a site visit for all of the interested bidders here in mid-January, January 9th, I want to say is the date. So we're looking forward to seeing that move forward. We're currently in final interviews for our IT support tech position, so that when our one IT person is out sick, as he is today, we will have another person that will be able to do backup for that. I'm sure Janine will be very thrilled. And we will also, and we are also currently reviewing applications for our associate or assistant planner. So excited for those two hiring processes that are moving forward. It's audit season. Our single audit and TDA audit for fiscal year 24-25 kicked off today. And our TDA triennial review, or 3-year TDA review, starts this Wednesday, 12/10. So it's a very busy time for our finance team, and I think we're in great shape as we go into those audits. And lastly, I would encourage you to check out, like, and share our recent social media posts on Thanksgiving, our 2025 Yolo Bus Wrapped, like, Spotify Wrapped, and other fun creative content that our communications team has cooked up. So please check it out. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. How exciting, $14 million. Yeah. All right, I do not see Transdev here tonight for our Transdev report, so we will move on to the long-range calendar. Will you be presenting that?
I will, and I will say, I believe Julie may have been listening online, so if she is there, we can turn her on and let her give her report.
Julie, are you there?
Did you see her there, Ginny? Yeah, she's there. Okay, great. We let her go home tonight.
Welcome, Julie.
Julie,
hi everyone. Good evening. Just a quick update. Obviously we got some new management in, so they are getting acclimated to their positions, which is great. Our number one focus right now is OTP. And we have been doing really well in our OTP with Beeline. I think there was a point in time where we were in like our 60%. I can now say we're in the 90s. So that is huge. And I'm just excited to see those numbers grow.
Hey, Julie, what's OTP stand for?
On-time performance.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Yes.
And on the long range calendar,
Yeah, so not, sorry, Julie, I just, pet peeve. All right, on the long range calendar, in January, we're gonna be doing it for the first time, a 2025 year in review that our communications team has put together, should be pretty fun. We'll have a YOLO aiding managed lanes quarterly update, there's been a lot happening on that, and then we're gonna be doing appointments to CCJPA and CARDA. In February, we will have a budget workshop for you on future revenue sources with some guest speakers, I'm very excited about that. And you'll be seeing the complete draft plan for the YOLO Active Transportation Corridors, or YATSE. In March, we'll tell you how it's been going with our transit operations RFP, like how many bidders we got. We won't have a contract for you yet, but we'll at least be able to give you a sense of how it's going. But we're gonna give you an update on our multimodal program. That will be an input to our next year's work plan. And then hopefully, fingers crossed, we may be approving an MOU for the Sacramento RCA. That's our long range calendar. Happy to take any suggestions or input for the long range calendar.
any comments by the board? All right, I can take public comment. Come on up, Eleanor.
Alan, there's some questions. I-80 Carter, where does that stand? That should be very important to you because you all voted for it and we're not getting money with the additional plan for 19 years. I think you should be concerned about that. I know it's difficult. Second is I hope in the short run, on the active transportation, there is a safety component. I know it's late into the day, but I think it's important and some recognition of e-bikes and that, or the motorized or the electric motorcycles. And also I heard passing comment about on-time performance. That's kind of the bottom line for our riders. And that should be written and presented to us. It's really, really important. It should just be a passing comment and all sorts of other performance indicators. I know we're working on those things, but that's the squeaky wheel gets the oil. So remember that again. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your comments. Come on up, Mr. Barnbaum.
Yes, thank you. This relates to the long range calendar. Thank you for presenting that. Some important items. Looks like that test from the information item is coming in March. But just a little reminder to folks watching this either live or on YouTube at their own time. Earlier, the board adopted a 2026 meeting calendar. So I just want to kind of remind the public how easy it will be to remember the 2026 meeting calendar. Every meeting will be on the second Monday of the month in this boardroom at 6 p.m. with two exceptions. In May, the meeting is on the third Monday. So Monday before Memorial Day. And there is no meeting in the month of August, as has been tradition of this district not to hold a meeting in August for summer recesses. Other than that, there are no other exceptions. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your comment on the calendar. Appreciate it. All right. Seeing there's no further business to conduct, I will adjourn the meeting at, 8 o'clock, but I just want to say it's a great night for public service and thank you all. Meeting adjourned.